And I do believe that we have rotten politics, and I'm not using that as an exaggeration.
Hey everyone and welcome. In this video, it's a bit of a follow-up to a video I did previously where I said that it may be the start of the decline of globalism. And I'll be honest, I was rounded on by some of yourselves saying that that's not the case. Now, obviously, I didn't explain my position on that very well. So I found an article, this is in Breitbart, that explains it a little bit better and why I think we're on the first ladder of the end of globalization. Now, this was in the Breitbart Business Daily, and it's titled The Rumble and the Ruble: How the West's Sanctions on Russia Strengthen the Ruble and Threaten Globalization. So what was the world's best performing currency of the past month? It asks. You guessed it, the Russian ruble. After plunging to 139 rubles to the dollar on March the 7th, the ruble staged a dramatic comeback to around 80 rubles to the dollar. That's only slightly weaker than where it was for almost all of last year. The recovery is equally impressive when compared with the euro. At the end of February, it took 89 rubles to buy a euro. In early March, that climbed to around 145 rubles, and now it's back down at 87.32. So it's actually improved its value. On Friday, the joke among foreign exchange traders, this is a joke that backfired big time, was that the Russian central bank was going to have to cut interest rates to keep the ruble from getting too strong and making its exports too expensive. That's unlikely, but the point is important. The sanctions on Russia were intended to cripple its currency on the global market in order to weaken Vladimir Putin's economy, and it's done the exact opposite. In fact, it's only damaging the sanctioners' economies. The recovery indicates that the sanctions, even as they have been strengthened both by official measures and private companies renouncing business ties with Russia, are not working as advertised. They're working exactly how I think they were hoping they'd work, to be honest, but that's for another story. The biggest reason for this, of course, is natural gas. Russia began to demand recently that Europe pay for natural gas in rubles instead of euros. So far, only Hungary has announced its intent to comply with this. That's not actually true. It's not just Hungary that are going to be paying for this. Apparently, Slovakia are also looking to pay in rubles, and I don't think they'll be the last, to be honest. Let's be honest, a lot of Europe is dependent on Russian gas. Whether NATO and America and the EU are happier with that or not is beside the point. No country worth the salt would ever commit hara-kiri at the will of the EU. But anyway, I digress. Let's continue, shall we? What would create a demand for rubles, especially from places where most of the saving is in euros? So the euro will fall against the ruble since markets are anticipation engines that have already begun in advance of European capitulation on the currency issue. Why does Russia want to be paid in rubles? The answer to that is complex. In the first place, the sanctions and private sector actions have cut Russia off from access to many of the things that it could use euros or dollars for. Western countries froze Russian foreign reserve holdings. We cut off Russia's access to imports from much of the world. Going even farther, we made it incredibly difficult to obtain financing to make payments for Russian energy. In other words, we squeezed Russia and its demand for euros and dollars by cutting off uses for dollar and squeezing the supply. Russia had little choice but to move to demand payment in its domestic currency. And it's worked perfectly, hasn't it? The ruble's going up in value and everything else is going down. Russia is likely to demand ruble payments not only for natural gas sent to Europe, but also oil and food commodities, just as I predicted, everyone, such as wheat and corn. This will increase global demand for the ruble. In fact, it will strengthen both the hands of Russian financial institutions and, ultimately, Putin's government. Those buying commodities in rubles will have to turn Russian banks for financing, as Russian bank loans are the source of rubles, and will seek to export more to Russia to obtain rubles. This will create an alternative to the euro-dollar system for countries that either must be or decided to be closer to Russia and away from what we're calling the West. This is likely to ultimately lead to strengthening demand for Russian government bonds and for Russian banks and exporting countries. China, in particular, may find this especially helpful. It could even decide if it wants to foster a ruble-backed alternative global currency system as part of a long-term strategy to supplant the United States. And let's be honest, the United States have threatened China recently. If you back Russia, we're going to sanction you as well. So there's nothing stopping them from doing that, is there, everyone? Certainly, China might decide to hold Russian bonds to diversify away from its US Treasury holdings. This will not just be about financial flows. This will change real flows of goods and commodities, shifting natural gas and oil flows from the west to the east, from Europe to China. it'll create competition for ships and likely drive up the price of shipping globally. So we're all going to feel a sting because of this. Europe will be more reliant on oil from Saudi Arabia. The US has almost no mechanism to ship oil to our east coast ports for export to Europe, which will mean shipping through the Suez Canal. As Credit Suisse Zoltan Posar recently pointed out, the world is likely facing a severe shortage of vessels capable of moving oil on long distances. As a choke point, Egypt could raise canal fees and bolster their own economy, or even demand to be paid in rubles so that Egypt can buy Russian wheat. What we have described here is the destruction of globalization in a much more detailed version of what I said, but it does still stand to the same as what I was saying. Globalization, I think, is going to slowly disappear and be replaced with self-reliance, in my honest opinion. And the fragmentation of the global economy into competitive but somewhat isolated trading groups, this will likely be uncomfortable for those who benefited the most from the system that has been in place, particularly Western financial elites, the corporations who became dependent on Chinese manufacturing. If China refocuses on either exports to Russia or its internal market, its demand for dollars and supply of goods to the US will weaken. Jobs will have to be reshored, domestic factory production restarted, and domestic investment grown. So this could turn out to be a great time for American workers. In the long run, maybe. But wasn't that what Trump was always trying to do? Bring back their industry to the US? And was vilified for it on a regular basis. Looks like they're not going to have much of a choice coming soon. Much of this has been brewing beneath the surface of world events for some time. The Russian invasion of Ukraine may turn out to be the catalyst that gets the engines of change running at higher gear. And that change will be the stripping away of globalization, in my honest opinion. But let me know what you think, everyone. I'd like to know your opinion. Stay sane. I'll see you on the next one.